Hi, I'm Vicki Hughes. I'm at the Desert Fiber Arts Guildhouse in Kennewick, Washington. I'm a student at Olds College in Olds, Alberta in their Master Weaver program. This is my last level before I can get my certificate. We needed to do a research project, and I decided to research whether I could combine a collapse weave fabric with a Kurume Kasuri, or Japanese tie-dye, design in one fabric. Let's talk about collapse weave fabric. A really good example is seersucker. This looks pretty wrinkly, but it's made that way on purpose. When it's warped, the white and the red, the warp threads, are warped at different tensions. The white is loose and the red is tight. It looks flat while it's being woven, but once it's cut off the loom and washed, these puckers show up. Another good example is this gauze type fabric, but instead of the warp being at different tensions, it's the weft. And you can see how elastic this is. This is just natural cotton. There's nothing special to it, except that the way it was woven lets this wrinkling happen. Now let's look at some of my samples of collapse weave. This first sample is cotton and hand spun cotton. The white part is regular commercial cotton and the brown is hand spun cotton. Because the hand spun cotton had a lot more twist and energy to it, it's what created the collapse. It was more elastic. But this is awfully gauzy. It's not very tightly set. Put that aside. My second attempt was set much tighter. This is about 30 ends per inch. I used a wool boucle in the warp and the weft, and when I took it off the loom and washed it, the wool shrank, giving this nice window pane effect. My third example, I was trying different wefts in a different kind of warp setup. I call this a crammed setup. I had stripes of 1 warp thread per dent here, and in the remaining I had 5 warp threads in 1 dent, and that's what gives this striping effect. Not a lot of collapse. This blue and this red is stainless steel wrapped in silk, and it bends and it kind of gives a collapse effect, but not quite what I was looking for. This next sample, I was trying a bunch of different wefts again. I have hand spun cotton, mercerized cotton, a wool, a silk, a cotton and elastic, and an acrylic novelty yarn. The ones I like the most are the silk and the hand spun cotton, but it didn't give me the big spaces I was looking for Kurume Kasuri. In this last example is a spaced warp, 1 inch wide with 1/2 inch empty spaces in between each group of 1 inch warps. Did the same thing weaving with the weft and left a 1/2 inch space in between each 1 inch wide weft. Collapsed a little bit, but still not quite what I was looking for. Let's talk about Kurume Kasuri now. Kurume Kasuri is a Japanese tie-dye technique that creates an image in the weft thread for the fabric before the fabric is even woven. It was discovered by a young woman named Den Inoue in 1788. She discovered that she could tie resist areas in a weft thread, and once it was woven, a design would appear. Let's see how she did this. In order to get an image onto the weft thread, first you need a design, which we have here taped onto this design frame. The design frame has 2 open-ended reeds on each side. A guide thread, or a tana ito, is threaded across, back and forth. Across the frame. And across the design. Once this is done, the design needs to be marked and transferred to the guide thread. Everywhere the design pattern crosses the thread, a mark is made on each and every thread. Once that's done, the threads are filled in and this marks where the ties will be for the resist. I'm doing it quickly here, but each thread needs to be picked up and marked all the way around the thread to make sure you have each area marked. After the design is fully marked, don't forget to mark the selvages on the outside of the reed. You'll have to tie those marks so you can locate exactly where the selvages are while you're weaving. Now we need to determine how long this thread is. If your design is 4 inches tall, and if the guide thread crosses over your design 20 times per inch, that means it crosses 80 in 4 inches. The table width is 16 inches. 80 times 16 is 1,280 inches, or 35.55 yards. We're going to round that up to 37 yards just to give yourself enough room to do the tying at the ends. Now comes the tricky part. We have our guide thread, we have it marked, and we know how long it is. Now we need to determine how many repeats of this guide thread you need to make for your fabric. That's going to be determined by how many repeats of the design you want in your fabric. If your design is 4 inches tall, 3 of those repeats will make 1 yard of fabric. 9 will make a yard. If you want your fabric to be 10 yards long, with this image repeated every 4 inches, you'll need 90 separate threads that represent a weft thread to make your fabric. A typical kimono is 12 to 15 yards long. So you'll need over 140 separate pieces of thread to make all of those repeats. Now, we have our guide thread marked. We've cut all the individual repeats of threads that we're going to need. We've tied them together at each end. Now we're going to have to tie the resist areas. I don't have a room that's 40 yards long, so this is the solution I came up with. I built these 2 reels. They have ratchets on the end, and I can keep this thread bundle nice and tight. Now let's talk about tying the knots. Traditionally, hemp is used to tie the areas that are going to be resisted. It's really easy to work with, but it has to be damp. And in this setting, that was going to be a little too messy. So we're going to use cotton thread that's been waxed. Here I have just some thrums left over from weaving, and I'm just going to pass them over the beeswax block a few times. I've got 3 in this bundle. I found a mark, and I'm going to line up the threads with it. Go around twice, make a loop over the top, and pull it tight. That's all there is to it. cut the bottom part very short so it will be easier to untie once the yarn is dyed. And now we're going to advance this and go on to the next area. Okay, here we are. There's the mark. Thread over the top, around twice, because this is just the selvage spots. Doesn't take much. Pull the thread tight, cut off very short. And you keep advancing this way until all of the marks have been covered with a cotton tie. Over the top, round twice, make a loop over the top, pull it nice and tight, cut it off short. There we go. This is all it takes, except now you've got another 34 yards to go. Okay, the hardest part has been done. All the threads have been tied, that bundle's been dyed and dried and untied. Now we separate out each thread to its own bobbin. After that's done, we're ready to try some weaving. Let's take a look at some of my samples. So I'm sampling not just the Kasuri, but what collapse style is going to be the one that I want to work with. I don't know if you can see the elephants in this design. If you can't, it's because the beat wasn't firm enough and the set was too wide. There was some collapse in it, but not quite what I was looking for. This gold is elastic thread and it did do its job of collapsing. The green, however, this is a silk, and my poor planning put that silk stripe right down the elephant's trunk. Doesn't look very good. This next sample is a set of waves. This was the original. This middle is the weft woven with cotton and elastic thread. First the cotton, then the elastic, then the cotton, then the elastic. And this top set was woven with the cotton and the cotton elastic together. I think this middle design turned out the best, but wasn't really what I was looking for. So I tried again. This is silk warp and silk weft, and I tried to have some higher tension stripes running down one side of this design. It's very subtle and it doesn't show up very well, and you can tell that I didn't have the beat quite right, because this design is supposed to be of leaves and it's not easy to read. You can read the leaf a little bit in some spots, but other spots it looks like it's just a jumble. So my final sample went back to cotton and cotton with elastic. These are two designs of squares. One is a negative of the other, and I separated each set of designs with a 1/2 inch of the cotton and elastic. This is pretty much what I was going for this whole time. I really like how this piece came out. So what have we learned? Well, I learned Kurume Kasuri is incredibly difficult to get right. I learned collapse weave has so many different ways to make it that you really, really need to sample a lot. I'm excited though because I want to try Kurume Kasuri with different weave structures, like maybe a crackle weave or a rose path twill. I'm really excited to see what the future holds. Thank you for listening.